Energy Minister Chris Bowen. I mean, does any minister in the Albanese government have such a record of almost total failure? I mean, for a couple of weeks, I'll give you another example of how his global warming schemes are collapsing. This time, two examples. The first, a couple of giant wind farm companies have pulled out of Bowen's Illawarra wind zone, which is off the New South Wales coast. And Bowen's office won't say if there's anyone else interested in building these wind generators, an approach that Bowen was touting only 4 months ago as a very big deal.
And it puts the Illawarra at the centre of Australia's renewable energy future.
Not anymore. The second project? Well, in January, Chris Bowen promised $63 million of your money to Sanjeev Gupta, a controversial Indian-born businessman who promised to turn his newly acquired Whyalla Steelworks green. No more coal.
We have all the ingredients necessary for a world-leading green steel hub.
But Gupta's expensive green plans keep getting delayed. His steelworks is losing massive money and is in fact being shut down for the second time this year. Local suppliers say they're tired of not getting paid or not paid on time. And the South Australian government is so nervous it's looking for another company to possibly take over. But it gets even worse for Chris Bowen, can you believe? Now, Jonan Johansson, president of the energy giant ConocoPhillips Australia, today warns that companies like his are investing much more now in gas projects in countries like the US or Qatar, but Australia is missing out because it's not competitive. It's got too much green tape. And this government and our state governments, they're just killing our future with their green agenda. And that was put brilliantly on the weekend by Matt Barry. He's the boss of tech company Freelancer.
You would think a country with 1,200 years of coal supply would be an energy superpower. You would think a country with 28% of the world's uranium reserves would be an energy superpower. You would think a country with 20% of the world's gas exports would be an energy superpower. We have cheap energy and we have abundant iron ore, and we turn that and elaborately transform that and other materials we have to become an export powerhouse. We should be the richest country in the world.
But we're not. Joining me is our Tuesday regular commentator, Nationals MP Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt, let's start with that wreckage of Energy Minister Chris Bowen's net zero global warming schemes. What I don't understand is how that long list of failures now, growing longer by the month, aren't a national scandal, and why he hasn't been sacked.
Well, I think it is a national scandal, Andrew. Obviously, the government and their support, many supporters in the media, are engaged in a giant cover-up mission for the failures of Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese's energy policy. But I think out there in the real world, as you saw from Matt Barry and many other people I speak to at the polls here in Queensland, and our energy situation is a national disgrace. It's something that hits them every quarter when your power bill turns up. And we all know that the Prime Minister and Chris Bowen promised us that they would cut our power bills by $275 a year. That hasn't happened. They've gone up by almost double that on average. Many people more than double of that have their bills increased by. And there's no accountability here. So you're absolutely right. The heads should roll here because these promises were made. They haven't been delivered. And it's an absolute wreckage right now. The energy system that Chris Bowen is presiding over is facing increasing shortages, failures after failures of these grand schemes that they promised us. You mentioned a couple there. You add to that hydrogen as well. We see Origin jump out of hydrogen in the last few weeks, and Woodside, and even Twiggy Forrest is calling the alarm on the mythical nature of our hydrogen plans. And so something has to change here. The Prime Minister should change Energy Minister. That could be the least he would do to try and reset this country and get back to a time when we used our natural resources to actually lower energy prices for Australians.
I think that's absolutely correct. And look, I must do another list of Chris Bowen's failed projects because it's 3 or 4 times longer than we've managed to mention.
You'll need the whole hour.
You joke, but it's true. You would need a whole hour. Just ephemeral. Look, the pictures are amazing. I just need to show this. Just how dodgy some of these solar panels and wind farms are. We actually had that, that Hurricane Milton that hit Florida, what was it, last week? They had a solar farm totally destroyed. That's how fragile these things are. Here today, gone tomorrow. And, that'll need replacing. That's more expense. I mean, Matt Canavan, the whole solar project scheme in Victoria, I understand rooftop solar, but these great farms taking up farming land, etc., that's part of the scheme that is not going to plan for Chris Bowen, because the rollout for a start is way behind and the costs are way higher than they were assuming.
Yeah, that destruction there, it's amazing footage, isn't it? But that destruction is a small window into the irony at the heart of this so-called transition. We are told we have to stop using these terrible things like coal and gas, which have powered our country for centuries now. Stop using those and install solar and wind to respond to this thing called climate change, to respond to a change in the weather, to respond to a situation which they claim will lead to more things like cyclones and hurricanes in the Northern Hemisphere. Yet these very things we're installing are themselves weather dependent. If you're worried about the weather, if you're worried about the variability of the weather going forward and how we might have more storms or more droughts, why would you install an energy system that relies on the sun shining, the wind blowing, and in the case of pumped hydro, the clouds raining? You wouldn't do that. It makes no sense. So if you really care about this stuff, you would be going down something like nuclear energy, which is perfectly safe through storms and natural disasters like this. They're designed to withstand that, of course, and of course has zero emission power. But Andrew, the reason they don't support nuclear power actually belies the total scam that this net zero climate change movement is. This is not about protecting the environment. It's not about changing the weather. It's about making a lot of money for people who have invested a lot in these technologies, and that's why they're so vociferously opposed to nuclear power, which would undermine all of their investments and their dreams of becoming very, very rich on the back of high power prices in Australia.
I think also nuclear stands for Western technology and capitalism, and they don't like that. They like the idea of wind and solar and being closer to nature. But I tell you what, Matt, it has exposed, that footage I showed you, exposed one fraud in what Chris Bowen said. He said, oh, yes, but the wind doesn't send a bill. Guess what? It just did to the guys who ran that show that's now totally destroyed.
It's tough for those people in Florida.
Tough for those. Matt Canavan, we're out of time. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. But honestly, we've got to have a look at that. That clip that I showed you before, that guy saying, we've got all this energy under our feet. How come we're not the world's richest country? It's such an abrogation of leadership. We need to explore that.